Hi again, everybody. This is Mark Mosgrove, along with my co-host Tim Andrews, and welcome to Project Woo Woo. Today we have a special guest to talk about the Book of Enoch, angels marrying giants, and other prehistoric mysteries. Please welcome Mike Roysh. So how you doing today,
Well,
gentlemen?
I'm doing good.
Good, Mark. How are you?
Not too bad. I'm wanting to talk about the Book of Enoch and how that fits in with our channel with all the unexplained type things. And Mike has been a guest on here before, and he threw down a Book of Enoch reference. And then what's funny is we had another guest on last week, threw out the same reference about the fallen angels. So we thought, let's talk more about that. So, Mike, do you want to give us a little bit of an overview of what the Book of Enoch is?
Well, it's a book that was discovered. Fragments were discovered in the Dead Sea Scrolls in Qumran. So they used the Dead Sea Scrolls to validate, like the book of Isaiah, that word for word, the modern version of Isaiah matches the Dead Sea Scrolls. And the Book of Enoch is considered not to be canonical, but it's referenced by Peter and Jude, and Peter talks about the angels that sinned, and then Jude references the actual Book of Enoch, and the Book of Enoch he references the person Enoch who fathered Methuselah before the flood, and Methuselah lived longer than anyone, 969 years, and it was prophesied that when he died, the flood would come, and he was the grandfather, I believe, of Noah.
Yes.
And Enoch was found righteous in the eyes of God, and then he walked with God. So he was taken up somewhat, similar to Elijah. They call it a rapture. The rapture people that theorize that there will be a rapture. So the Book of Enoch is in the beginning of the book. He references the hierarchy of the angels, and if you look into the writings of Paul in the Bible, he talks about principalities and powers. Well, in Enoch, he lays out these angels. There's like 10 of them that oversee. Each of them has 10 lieutenants or whatever underneath them, 10 other angels. These are fallen angels that came down to earth and made an oath on Mount Hermon. I think it's Hermon in Lebanon or Israel. It's near there, southern Lebanon, northern Israel, and they made an oath to commit an act against God. They left their first estate. They came down here, and Enoch talks about how angels can appear as men. So we have no idea what they did, how they did it, but it says in the Bible in Genesis 6 that the angels that fell, the sons of God, and I believe that refers to the angels that fell. They took wives, whomever they wished, and then they had giants with them. When they corrupted the human genome, the line, and in my opinion, that was to stop the birth of Jesus Christ, who was prophesied in when Satan got Eve to eat the apple, and Adam and Eve fell. We are in a fallen state, and to me, we were taken out of the dimensions that we used to enjoy originally. Not us, but Adam and Eve did. We know nothing else of that. We know the fallen state, and that's it. So Enoch explains that he how that happened and what happened with them. the fallen angels asked Enoch to interject for them. He was taken to heaven in a vision or in a dream or somehow spiritually, however it was. He interceded for these angels, and he was sent back by the good angels, through God, by the good angels, to tell them they're going to be locked up in everlasting chains. Some of them were given like 10,000 year sentences or something like that. So they're going to be let out again. And he goes through all that. Enoch does. So the offspring of these angels and the women were called Nephilim, which are giants. And they were corrupt. And everything they did, they demanded worship. I think the fallen angels were demanding the worship. And then the Nephilim fought with each other. They're territorial. And that's what goes back to Paul talking about principalities and powers. I think there's a hierarchy. So they have, it's just like an army. You have a general, then you have colonels, then you have lieutenants, all the way down to corporals. And the lower levels were the giants that they manipulated the humanity and the DNA of the human race, and they created a race that is ungodly. And to me, their spirits when they die are stuck on the earth. And then Enoch talks about the different layers of hell. I think it is. He goes down into the earth, and he sees where these angels are chained up, and he tells them, "You're going to be chained up here." And there's also giant sections where the people that die, or their spirits, are to be held until the final judgment. And he goes through. He talks about the Messiah is going to be here. And I believe it's 70 generations after him. And then if you look in the book of Luke, he goes back to Adam, and if you count the generations, it's 70 after Enoch where Jesus was born. It's very interesting.
Go ahead, Tim.
Well, I mean, I
have a lot of questions, but I don't want to monopolize.
Well, no, that's okay. I just kind of had a quick one right off the top of my head. It's a pretty long book. It's about 90 pages that I saw there. It's a long read. But my question is, I don't think there's any question of Enoch existing and being mentioned and cross-referenced even with scripture. But I'm wondering why the Book of Enoch didn't make the cut. I don't think it's, from what I've read and from what I understand, I don't know if it's so much a question of validity as far as references to Enoch, but from what I understand, the book was written after Christ's death, which that's controversial because of these things that happened before, and it wasn't written by Enoch. So I think those are some of the things that disqualify it. But do you have any more insight into why it didn't make the cut into scripturally, except for, what was it, Ethiopia or some African country that they still recognize it?
Yeah, Ethiopia does. But I think it's because it was pre-flood. There's nothing survived the flood except for the 8 people on Noah's Ark and the animals that they loaded up. So everything else was destroyed. The monoliths that we see around the earth, I believe those were the temples of the giants that built those, and they were territorial. So they fought, and they had kingdoms, and they fortifications is what they had. So everything we know about Enoch is word of mouth, but the only thing that I see validity in myself is that they found writings in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So, and that's why I only deal with the first book of Enoch, and the rest of the books were written later. So, to me, those were bastardized. And that's why it was a mishmash of all these books together. But the first book, where he talks about the angels that sinned, and the 1 through 6, basically is, once you get past that, he goes into other things. But that's the reason it wasn't considered scripture, is because it was all the other added stuff in the books. It's not written by him,
Right.
for sure. I don't think even 1 through 6 was. It was just word of mouth. That's how the Bible was written also.
But those that, like 1 through 6, there were references. That's some of the remnants that they found in the Dead Sea, with the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, if one believes the flood story, and if one believes that Noah was the great-grandchild of Enoch, I could suppose that Noah grabbed his great-grandpa's paperwork. They didn't have flash drives then, but he grabbed the paperwork, and he would have brought it on the ark. He probably would have preserved it.
That could have happened, yes.
With the assumption that the Noah story aligns in human history, which people can have different opinions on that. I'm a little troubled by the Noah story, just in the aspect, how do you get all those animals in that boat? Because there's so many species. So, but we're not talking about the Noah story and the validity, although we're in the same neighborhood. We're in the same neighborhood of the Bible, because like you said, Mike, the actual Bible refers to the sons of God, which is interpreted to be the angels, came down, mated with the women. They had giants. The one thing that troubles me about that story is it says that they were 3,000 ells tall.
I think it was 300.
And I looked that up, and an ell is about a cubit. And a cubit is about the length of a person's to their elbow, I believe.
Yeah.
So, unless that's a mistranslation, these giants would have been like a mile tall.
It was 300 ells.
Oh, was it 300? But
yeah.
Then they would be 500 feet tall.
Well,
I mean, it could be. It could be. But literally, they could stomp people, because that's even more than, like, King Kong or Godzilla. I mean, that's pretty big. So that caught my attention. I'm like, so what do you think about that?
Well, if you really want to dig into something crazy, go on YouTube and look up Mud Fossil University. This guy, he gets all kind of hate mail and stuff, and he just won't even answer people anymore. But he keeps going. But he claims that these giants, like the what the heck's it called, Devil's Tower, out in, is it Utah, Idaho, wherever that is, Devil's Tower. He says that's a snapped off Achilles tendon.
Wow.
Yeah, this guy is out there, and he's got all kind of medical books and stuff, and he these big rocks, he'll say that's blood platelets. So these things could have been.
That begs the question, Mike and Mark, I think, is the even bigger question is, they mated with human women. How did those women survive that?
They didn't. They didn't. They died. When they gave birth, they died. But I think that those other, in my opinion, there was a flood before Noah's flood that destroyed everything. Because it talks about in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, first sentence in the Bible. And if you believe that, then we can talk. If you don't believe that, all this other stuff is meaningless to even talk about. So the second verse talks about the earth became void and without form. It didn't say it became. The earth was void and without form. Well, how did that happen? It became to me, and the words you look at when you look at the meanings of the words, we're reading English translation that came from Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. That's what made up the Bible. And the King James translators, they took words and just they thought this is what it meant. They put it in there. Well, so if you look it up yourself and let the Holy Spirit work with you to figure out on your own, other meanings can take precedent over what they wrote at the time. So the earth, if the earth became void without form, there could have been a giant. I mean, giants. The angels. Who knows what they look like? You know. And this mud fossil guy is very interesting. He claims that in Africa, and it goes almost all the way across North Africa, is a giant dragon. And if you look at Google Maps, you'll see it. You can see it. And it looks like it's got a fish in its mouth. And he claims that Atlantis is in that area. And he zooms in on other videos that Atlantis is there. But this giant dragon, when he zooms in, he goes down the throat and everything, and it is just amazing how it really looks like a dragon. And I know you see a lot of things, you think, oh yeah, it looks like it. Clouds look like animals and such, but it is really amazing. That's the one to really look at is on, and if you look on Google Earth, look at Northern Africa, and you'll see a big red dragon, and it looks like, and he says Michael the angel slew this dragon, and it chopped him in the neck. And if he had a giant sword, and there's a break in this thing's neck, and then it's spewing out. It looks like it's spewing out poison and fire onto this fish, giant fish.
How big is this on the Earth?
All the way across Northern Africa.
So the whole continent. So you're talking what, a couple thousand miles?
Yeah.
In the Sahara Desert?
It's at least 1,000 miles along. This supposed carcass of a dragon. Now,
I'm gonna have to look that up because I've never heard of that. Now I know that the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars is in the Baltic Sea. Have you ever seen that one?
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, it looks like the Millennium Falcon. It's in the ocean, and I don't know if they ever went down there to see what it was. I'm not sure.
If you go on Google Earth, just go on that mud fossil and look at that guy's videos first, and then research for yourself on Google Earth. But he never brings it up. There it looks like a giant lizard. I think it's at the tip of South America, down by Antarctica, under the water. It is just freaky looking. But he talks about these giant dragons on America. One goes all the way up through California, and he says it has a pincher, kind of like a scorpion, up in Alaska.
And they're sure that's not Nancy Pelosi?
It quite possibly could be. But when I started looking at that, and then I was thinking about the Book of Enoch, and I'm looking at it with a grain of salt, but I started seeing these things. I'm like, wow. I started summarizing what if, they talk about the Big Bang Theory and all that, and then people talk about the flat Earth, and what if original creation, everything was this giant flat piece of Earth, and that was Earth, everything, the whole universe, every bit of matter that is out there, every planet, every star, all was together, and then when those big giant things like on Mud Fossil University, if those giants were real and they got so corrupted, God destroyed it all and just blew it up, and then took what was the remnants of Earth, balled it up, flooded it with water, and threw it as far away from him as he could get it because he was so disgusted by it. This is what I'm thinking, and after eons of time that in darkness, they all those angels were trapped under the water in prison, and they're still there. But these, I'm talking about before the flood of Noah. He recreated, when it talks in the Bible about the Holy Spirit moved across the face of the deep. And then creation started, the 6 days of creation. To me, it's a recreation. He's bringing the earth back up out of the water. And then it says the sons of God, the angels in heaven, they applauded when he's doing something again. God was doing something again. That could have been 14 billion years. We have no idea. And they talk about the earth, the universe could be that old. So if it was 14 billion years, could you imagine being chained up? And, you're down there thinking, man, I really screwed up. And you're still there. And I always wonder, why is Satan, why does so much trouble and grief and pain and misery go on on the earth, and God hasn't intervened and done away with it? Could be he's still waiting for Satan to beg for forgiveness, and Satan won't do it. But that shows how long suffering, and how much he loves mankind, so much that he became a man and died for our sins to save us from our condition. That's the way I look at it.
Sure. Now, you mentioned this guy from the Mod Fossil University. There's also another journalist who likes to talk about when I say prehistoric, I mean pre-written history.
Yes.
The gentleman's name is Graham Hancock, and he's been a lightning rod for people in the geological fields, because he says basically that there's signs that there was a advanced civilization on the earth that got wiped out either from the flood or from the last ice age. And he says all these monuments all around the earth with all the different civilizations, they all came up with the same sort of pictures and their pictographs. And like the mound builders, you had mound builders that were building the same exact things in North America that was in South America. And a fascination with snakes. Pretty much, there's snakes on all of the pictographs in all of the different artifacts or features, or whatever you want to call them. He says that he believes these were built a longer time ago, and that as time went on, those people or beings got wiped out. And then what happens? The same thing that happens here with us. I live in a house that had 2 other families that lived in it before me. So if you've got a building sitting there that's been there, and you come and stumble upon it, you're probably going to use it.
Right.
It's a good place to set up shop. I mean, just like the city of Jericho that in the Bible says that was the horns blew the walls down. I mean, they see signs that Jericho has been rebuilt. People tend to go back to the places where they were before, because usually those were good places to live. That's why they were there in the first place. So in the town I live right now, we've got a mound, and in 5 minutes, I could go down there, and it's a big, huge, giant mound, a big, huge circle, and it's set up to fit with the solstice and that sort of thing. And they say there's no remains in this mound, but all the little signs around there say that these were built by so-and-so Indians like 1,300 years ago. That's their best evidence, because they know those Indians lived here. But maybe that mound was built 100,000 years ago. See what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And the
I think they
Indians that
were.
lived there 1,300 years ago, they stumbled on it and they chose to live here because it offered protection, or
Yes,
it seemed important. And
yes.
since it seemed important, then they figured it was holy. And since they figured it was holy, they did their ceremonies there. But people reject this Graham Hancock. He goes on Joe Rogan as well and talks about these things. They basically say he's a kook and he's putting two and two together and he's getting five. What do you
Yeah.
think about this, Mike, and Tim too, and how it fits with this lost history of possibly there being giants or angels living on the earth?
Well, the Indians in Ohio, like the Serpent Mound, they claim that the mounds were here when they got here. So
Oh,
when anybody says native, what native are you talking about? I think that they're playing a game with words. Because we think of natives as the Indians. Well, the Indians, from what we know, they came across the land bridge from Russia to Alaska and moved down, and then, as time went on, they became separate tribes, and then the Europeans came over and took over. So we think of the indigenous people as American Indians. Well, they look at it as when we got here, those mounds were here. But the governments, they want you to think that they don't want you digging either. They don't want you digging. Oh, that's a sacred burial ground. You can't dig in there. Well, we might find something that they don't want us to find because they like to push the anti-biblical Darwinism worldview, and that is that there's no God. So if you can prove that there's giant bones, you're proving the Bible. And they don't want that.
what do you think, Tim?
Well, we recently had a guest, parapsychologist, Brandon Methuselah, I think you know him,
Yes.
that was talking about bones under a house that was built right here in our local area, in Medina County, where we reside. And it leads me to believe, when I look at all these structures like the Sphinx and the pyramids and everything, one thing I would bet my bottom dollar on is there is no way they did not have the knowledge, the know-how, or the equipment to put something like that, and the architectural knowledge to put something like that together. So either they were used as slaves and guided by a higher power that knew how to do all those things, or something. But I really have a hard time believing that people back in that age had the wherewithal and the know-how to build those structures, and the way that they build them within millimeters. I mean, even modern architects don't have a lot of the technology to pull something like that off.
Right.
So was it the giants? I mean, I think there was some kind of reference that they may have done that. I don't know how many giants there were. I don't know if there was an account of how many giants there were roaming the earth at the time or what have you, but giants are not giants. I mean, it's still a hell of an undertaking to be able to do that. Now, if they were really as big as you say they were, I mean, it would almost be like somebody putting together a model. If they were that big and they could handle the blocks and
Legos.
everything, yeah, they could just do that themselves. But you'd still have to have the wherewithal and the know-how to do that. So I believe they were getting some kind of guidance from somewhere. So that's a really intriguing facet of the whole thing. I've always wondered, how in the world did they put all that together? What's your theory on that, Brad? Or got Brad on the mind. I was just talking about Brad. Mike, I'm sorry. What's your theory on that?
There's a guy named L.A. Marzulli, and he does on the Hunt of the Nephilim series, and he says that what led me to him was I read in the Bible that God was going to do this evil. And then, and like I said before, that when you look up the word, the original word actually means to lift his protection. It doesn't mean he's going to do evil. He's going to lift his protection. So you're on your own. And they after the Hebrews were let go in Egypt, they were made to wander for 40 years because of unbelief. They were afraid of the giants that were in the land. I think it was 12 spies went into Israel. Caleb and Jacob said, or was it Jacob? No, not Jacob. Joshua. Caleb and Joshua gave good reports. Hey, we got to go in. They knew that they were being led by God to wipe out everyone, every tribe. I can't remember the names. Anakim, Raphaim. All these were giant races. Well, at first, when I first read it, he's talking about killing all these people. Well, they were not of God. They were Nephilim descendants, and this was after the flood, Nephilim. So they weren't. They were, the pre-flood that we know nothing about. They might have been bigger. They might have been not as big after the flood. So L.A. Marzulli says that when they were fighting, that they got, 40 years they wandered in the desert, then they finally moved in after the generations were gone, that from unbelief, because they wouldn't be led by God, basically. They went in and battled, and they took the land. And according to L.A. Marzulli, though, when they saw they were going to be defeated, they fled. And he said there's an American Stonehenge and all these, and he goes into the mounds and different monoliths and all that, and they are connected. So through the Nephilim, and he calls it fallen angel technology, Nephilim architecture.
Huh.
That built all the monoliths and structures we see.
So in other words, the giants could have done the constructing under the tutelage of their parents, I guess you would call it, which were the fallen angels. Correct?
Correct. Yes. And in the Book of Enoch, he lists the different fallen angels and what they taught mankind. And Azazel is attributed to all sin. Like he's like the main one that got talked to, and he was the one that wanted Enoch to petition for them, for the fallen angels, and he was attributed to the original one that sinned, but Samjaja, I think it was. He's the one that got him to swear an oath. He was afraid that he was going to be culpable all by himself. So the other 199 fallen angels swore an oath, and that was on Mount Hermon at the summit, and there was a temple up there, 9,000 something feet above sea level. There was a temple, and then there was a tablet there that can't remember the guy's name. He brought it down. He broke it in two pieces, and it's in, I think, London now, in a museum. And it was Greek language was written on it, but it said his name was Sir Charles Warren in 1869. He got 132 feet above sea level. It was translated to say, according to the command of the greatest and holy God, those who take an oath proceed from here. So they came down on Mount Hermon, and that's what it said in the Book of Enoch, and this tablet was there. And he took it down, and it's in the British Museum. So I don't know what museum it is, but it's in Britain. You can look it up and see that.
I'm gonna look that up.
Yeah.
I've got a quick question too. Where do the archangels fit into all this? I mean, there was some mention in the book. Did they monitor the the fallen angels, and I know it talks about the Watchers. The Watchers were the fallen angels? Were they the archangels? I can't recall, but I know it did mention, was it Michael or Gabriel or some of the angels that we're familiar with, reading about. What was their role in the whole thing?
Well, those are the good guys,
Right.
from God, and they have different jobs. Gabriel is a messenger. Michael's a warrior. I can't remember how many there were. 7, I think, that in the Book of Enoch they talk about them, and they locked up the fallen angel.
Okay.
My recollection and my notes said that I don't know how you pronounce it. Uriel, Uriel.
Yeah.
That he was like the biggest one of all. But I don't know if I've seen that in the rest of the Bible. I know we've seen Gabriel. No. I know we've seen Michael.
Yeah. The ones that they mentioned, there was one that started with a P. I can't remember. I've never seen that before. But it's in the Book of Enoch.
But people have, from what I understand, people have the wrong idea of like what an angel looks like. A lot of people think they're just the soft, angelic, white, glowing with the wings and the long robes and things, when in reality, I've been told this. I haven't done a great deal of research on it. I'll be honest, but that they were like big, beastly, overpowering beings. That the way people perceive them to be is in no way, shape, or form what they were. I mean, they were imposing figures, from what I understand.
Yes, and in Ezekiel, when the seems like the throne of God is coming to talk to him, there's 4 beings that have 4 faces, and they're spinning and they're moving around, and they don't turn, but they have a face of an ox, face of a man, face of a bear, and the face of a lion. And could you imagine seeing something like that? It'd be just frightening, and every time, like when I believe it was Gabriel went to talk to Mary and Joseph, when he appears to them, first thing he says, "Be not afraid." Because could you imagine, this thing coming before you? It just scared the daylights out of you. And the first thing he says, "Be not afraid." They're the good guys.
And you thought that girl you took home after last call was bad when you woke up in the morning, huh? That ain't nothing.
Wasn't very afraid till the next morning.
Well, one of the very first stories in the Bible is the Garden of Eden story and the serpent. It never says in the Bible this is Satan. It just says the serpent.
Right.
Now, scholars and general people put 2 and 2 together and say that serpent was Satan. But I challenge you to find where it says that the serpent was Satan, because it doesn't. I don't believe it says that in the Bible. It's just inferred. And I do remember that there is a reference to the serpent, something about the serpent's gonna strike the heel. Maybe Mike, you know this better than me because you're obviously more knowledgeable of the Bible than I am, about how the serpent was gonna strike the man, and the man was gonna, but basically it was a reference to Jesus and defeating Satan. Now, have you ever heard that before?
Oh yeah, there will be enmity between your seed and the seed of the woman. Now the seed of the woman is biologically, the seed is with the man. So the seed from the woman refers to the virgin birth.
Oh.
So that's a direct prophecy of what's going to take place, that Jesus will bruise his heel or crush his head. He will bruise the seed of Satan, or seed of the serpent, like you said. See, there I go screwing up and putting that in there, but it's the seed of the serpent will bruise his heel, and he will crush his head. So he knows that the serpent knows he's going to be crushed eventually.
But it does indicate that, Satan was an angel. So they have the ability to either change shape or possess, which we've seen stories of animals being possessed in the New Testament. I think you mentioned it in the last podcast about the pigs with the demons inside them. But either that serpent was shape-shifting, say that 10 times fast. Either it was a shape-shifting Satan, or Satan took the form of a snake, or he possessed a snake. I don't know which, but the same could apply because it's the same creatures that came down and mated with women. And that is in Genesis. We talked about that. Genesis, what was it? 4 or whatever that was? I don't remember.
Genesis 6.
Genesis 6. So that aligns with Enoch. And Enoch is also mentioned in the Bible. And then there's a couple phrases that Jesus says in his sermons that are almost word for word from what Enoch says. I picked up on a couple of those. And then you mentioned Jude and Peter, and there's also a reference in Hebrews that kind of go back, reference Enoch. So people that lived in the world in AD 33 or whatever, they knew about the Book of Enoch.
Oh yeah, they understood this way better than we do.
But I am troubled because I attempted to read that whole book. And I challenge anybody to try to read it, because it starts out, I can follow, and then after a while, it's like, oh boy. It gets tough. Just like trying to read Isaiah or one of those books,
Yeah, there's a guy named Ken Johnson that has just written a book, and he puts it in English. In modern, okay. He translated it. He puts it in modern language. I haven't read it, but I just know that he just put it out there. He's advertising it right now, and I probably won't get it, because to me, I know enough about the beginning, and that's what I believe is I got other things to worry about.
Sure, but what troubled me when I was reading it, though, and you did mention earlier in our talk about some parts of Enoch may have been written by somebody else or at a different time, because there's a whole section where it gets into astronomy, and it gets into the sun and the moon, and when you read it, it's a person from 2,000 years ago interpretation of what's going on in the sky.
Right.
It doesn't really fit modern cosmology, or whatever the word is, astronomy. And it does say that the sun, that there's 12 12 gates, and the gates open and the sun comes out and the gates close. And same with the moon. It says that there's 364 days in the year. And I did a little research on that. And around the time of the Babylonians, now keep in mind that the Israelites were held in captivity by the Babylonians, and they had a solar calendar very similar to what is in this Book of Enoch. It makes me think that at least that part of the Book of Enoch was written later.
Yeah. If you look at the calendars too, that's another anti-biblical something against God. Let me put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
God taught the Hebrews to use the calendar by the moon, not the sun. And a buddy of mine asked me one time, we were talking about it, and so there's a 30-day cycle, 29.5-day cycle of the moon. And then there's an 18.5, I believe, year cycle of the moon. And that is in the Serpent Mound. They have where it rises and falls. To do that 18.5 years apart, how would they know? How would the American Indians know that, for one?
Sure.
But we were talking about the solar calendar and the lunar calendar, and he asked me, why did God want them to use a lunar calendar? And I have no idea. And he says, because you can't look forward. The month doesn't start until the new moon is sighted in Jerusalem. So if it's cloudy or rainy, and it had to be verified by 2 witnesses in Jerusalem that the month started. So now 14 days from now in a certain month, like the feasts of Israel, it's on a certain day of a certain month, like all of them, Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is Passover first, and then unleavened bread. Then you have the fall feast, tabernacles, and you can't pick the day it's going to be because you don't know when the first day of the month is. So if it's cloudy and you don't see it, the next day, if it's cloudy again, it automatically by default becomes the first day. Now you can prepare for when the feast day is going to take place that month. If you have a solar calendar, you can tell what day it's going to be, day of the week, years in advance. And that's what we use. So if you look at that, like the Essene, that's another interesting group of people. The Essenes were the writers of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and they have a calendar, and they talk about 6,000 years is the end of man. Then there'll be 1,000-year reign, and they talk about the millennial kingdom. It's in Revelation that the millennial kingdom will happen. Well, they have it all written out. We're right there. The Jubilee. So people talk about this being the final Jubilee, but through the solar calendar, everything's got so confused of what. Do we really know what day of the week it is compared to creation? We assume we're right by our calendars. We don't really.
Well, then, if God wanted the Jews to do a lunar calendar, but then the Book of Enoch says to use the solar calendar, is that one of the reasons why the Book of Enoch is not a canonical book of the Bible, because it's in direct conflict?
It could very well be, yes.
So the question is if one thing in the Book of Enoch is false, how can we say any of it is true? Or is it possible that, like we talked earlier, different parts of the Book of Enoch were written at different times, and maybe the first part was oral tradition that was passed down? But when you get into the astronomy and the all that stuff, I mean, it's brilliant for someone from being 2,000 years ago. I mean, it's brilliant. I mean, they're basically figuring out what's going on in the sky using their brain at the time, not knowing that they're on a round planet. But the book says that the head archangel told him this. So I have a little bit of an issue with its validity on whether it's, to use your expression, God breathed or
right.
Inspired by God. What do you think about all that, Tim?
Well, yeah, no, I agree with you. It's kind of hard to put everything together, but you talked about the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the Annanites, I think you said, were the authors of the Dead Sea Scrolls.
The Essenes.
Essenes, I'm sorry. The Essenes were the authors. So you give validity to that first part of the Book of Enoch because parts of it were found with the Dead Sea Scrolls. What were some of the things that the Essenes, excuse my lack of Bible knowledge, I guess, but that were in the Dead Sea Scrolls that would give that validity? And was that cross-referenced in the Bible, in any of the books of the Bible? What was written in the Dead Sea Scrolls?
I just look at the book of Isaiah as my main reason. It's word for word, and the scribes would, if they weren't sure, and I think Jesus said, not a dot or a tittle, I think they call them. So it's like the crossing of a T or dotting of an I will not be fulfilled, of Scripture will not be fulfilled until the coming of the Son of Man shall be. But if they weren't sure in the Hebrew language that was a yot and a tittle, they would put it in the parentheses that this, and in the margin, in parentheses in the margin, that this was what we think it is. And there's missing sections of the Dead Sea Scrolls, obviously, because they were rolled up. They didn't have books, they rolled them up and they were in jars. And then, a kid hit it with a rock, so the rock might have busted some out of it. But when they deciphered them, if they didn't have it, they didn't put it down. But what we can see, it matches Isaiah. So if that matches, I think the rest of them, and they were very holy. The Essenes, they lived separate out in the desert, and they were godly. So they really believe that's what I look at.
So they were almost like Christian monks, huh?
Right.
In a way.
Yes.
Mike, you mentioned the term "son of man," and that term is spoken or written in Enoch about a son of man. The son of man is, according to Enoch, was around before the earth and the universe was created, which fits with the Christian view of Jesus and Jesus Christ. He was the elected one. He was going to be overseeing the final judgment. And there was one other thing. And the vision of the resurrection at the end times, and that the Son of Man was going to oversee this. Now, if the Book of Enoch, or the first Book of Enoch, was written pre-flood, that's an amazing find, because really there's a little bit of some obscure here and there references to the Jewish Messiah in the Old Testament, but you really kind of got to be looking for it. But the Book of Enoch, it's like hitting you across the face that, hey, you're Jesus, or someone's coming, and that's probably why some people think this was written after Jesus.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about that? Because either it is spot on, just amazingly foretelling, or it was written later and it was passed off as being older.
That's quite possible. That's the way I look at it too. That they're trying to force it too much. Then instead of just leaving it alone, let it stand on its own. That they're trying to make something out of it, make it their own. Whoever was writing it, there could have been 20 people claiming to be Enoch, and writing stuff, and then they mishmashed it all together. So it is. But that's why I go back to the Dead Sea Scrolls. That's sure. before Christ was born, and the Book of Daniel. That it talks about that. That was 700 years, I believe, before Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Or was it 490, 500 years before?
I think, because this just came up in my research when I was looking about the astronomical things, about how it matches with what the Babylonians thought. The Jews were in captivity in about the 5th or 6th century BC, is what I read, where the Babylonians came in and sacked Jerusalem and took a bunch of Jews with them. And the Book of Daniel was written during that captivity. Daniel was in captivity when he wrote the book, right?
Yes, Jeremiah was warning Israel it was going to happen. He was taken too, and Daniel was young. And then he rose up through the ranks and became part of the government. Daniel did. He interpreted the dreams for King Nebuchadnezzar. He predicted King Cyrus was going to let him go and go back and rebuild the temple. And they did. When King Cyrus came in, Daniel showed him where his name was in the Bible. And he was so impressed by that. There was a plaque he put up, and he freed it. He freed the Jews that wanted to go back home were allowed to go back home. Daniel stayed behind. He was an old man at that time.
Go ahead, Tim.
No, it's
Your head's spinning.
it's when no, yeah. You always do that to me, Mike. It's some things that I'd never even taken into consideration, and I read a bit of the book too, and it was amazing. But I'm starting to get a clearer picture on why perhaps it wasn't included. I mean, when you really look at the books of the Bible, especially in the New Testament, you can see how consistent they all are. Even though they're written by different authors, it's amazing. If there's any proof that God exists for agnostics or atheists, is that all these people tell the same story from either the same or different viewpoints. You know, the disciples, a lot of them see it the same way. They were there when Jesus was alive and they walked with him. But there are inconsistencies. Like you said, it may be prophetic. Those may have been prophecies, but there's really so many different inconsistencies as far as why it's almost just the opposite. You can tell it's almost not like God inspired or God breathed, because there's so many different viewpoints and possibly, with all these different authors. But as far as what fascinates me about the Book of Enoch is really the correlations and the mentions of Enoch himself and some of the different concepts. Even in Genesis, when they talk about the giants, it amazes me that there are all of these references. So it's legitimate to me. I mean, there's a lot of things that are good reference points, I think. But as far as not being included in the book in the Bible, I can kind of see where the reasoning behind that.
Yes, if you believe the Bible is God breathed, then you got to think God had his hand in putting that book together, the whole Bible, not just
Right.
the first. The Jews believed the first 5 books, the Torah or whatever, and then the rest they know about, but like the prophets and everything, but they don't include that. Well, there are certain sects of the Jews, but if God put this Bible together, which I think is the way it happened through the Holy Spirit, he kept it out of. He might have kept this out of there, because for one thing, when God mentioned that in Genesis 6 about the fallen sons of God mating with the women and men of renown, they were giants on the earth, men of renown. Done. In Enoch, he starts naming all these fallen angels. Well, God doesn't want to give them any homage whatsoever. He brief and to the point. He doesn't want to name their names. He will not name their names. He doesn't want them to be known because of the evil that they did. That's where I look at it.
Well, basically, the Book of Enoch is saying that it's because of the corruption of the angels that came down that really is responsible for the flood, more than just the evilness of man. Now, granted, evil tends to rub off.
Yeah.
You know, just look in the year 2025, there seems to be more and more of it. But, and it seems to be more acceptable. And I think that's kind of what the problem was back then, as it became more and more acceptable. But Enoch is basically kind of blaming the fallen angels, it seems to me.
Yes.
That they came down, they supposedly came down to help, but then they did more harm than good. But then then you always have the philosophical question: why would God allow it? Why does God allow bad things to happen?
Exactly. And he knows everything before it's going to happen.
Yeah.
So he knew it was going to happen. That's a tough one.
But then was Satan set up? Did God create Satan knowing that he was going to betray him? I mean, Or does God sometimes work with his hand tied behind his back where he like doesn't reveal things to himself so he can be somewhat surprised? Because I mean it's clear in the Bible that God says he was disappointed with how the earth was going, and that's why he did the flood. Now, some cynical person, I'm not, but I'm just asking the question, could say, well, God, why did you allow that to happen? Why did you allow the angels to come down and mate with women? Why did you allow all those things? And why were they able to, different species, how were they even able to procreate unless they took human form, like we talked about earlier? So, it is a question of faith on why God would allow that, but then you could say that about basically any evil in human history. I guess basically it's because of the concept of free will. But the question is, did God know that Satan was going to do what he was going to do? And if he did know ahead of time, then wasn't Satan set up?
Yeah, like Judas. Same thing
Yeah,
with
that's another
Judas.
one.
He was set up,
Poor Judas. No, not poor Judas. But he was.
But in the Bible, he talks about the mighty cherub that covereth, or something like that. So it was like he was the highest of creation. How far you have fallen. So that seems to be the most beautiful and angelic being that led the angels in worship in heaven. If you read I can't remember what book it's in. Isaiah is one of them, and there's another one they calls him Lucifer. How far thou hast fallen. Now I don't know if Lucifer and Satan are the same or separate. So it might be two different beings that he's talking about, but the one seemed to have musical instruments built into his body that he led worship. And when he calls him the cherub that covereth, that was the big kahuna over everybody. And he wanted to be worshiped as God. So here we are today. The battle between those two.
Yeah, he was the right hand man. I mean, if you want to put it in layman's terms, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
the most powerful, probably the second most powerful being in the universe, and who knows what powers God imparted upon him. But I still would think he would still have the ability to squash him or stop him, but maybe allowing it to play out was part of God's plan all along, because now the men go through their trials and tribulations, and the good are separated from the evil in the end, and some go to be with God, and others go, the majority unfortunately will go to be with Satan, and then Satan will be I believe he's defeated. So I think that doesn't bode well for the souls that perish in the end. I mean, they're there to suffer forever. But we're kind of getting away from our theme a little bit. But it is a question to ponder. That's for sure.
I think it all goes together, really. Like Mark said, why. When you're a little kid, you're always asking why. Life is nothing but a bunch of secrets revealed. That's all you. As you go along, it's everything. When you don't know something, you're ignorant. Then all of a sudden, a secret's revealed to you. Now you know. And a lot of this stuff we'll never know. But that's what Mark brought up is very, very good. We're going through all this. For what reason? God could have put an end to it right away. He wants us all to be holy. Were we all just a thought in God's mind? And that's until we're all brought through life and death and the afterlife. We have a choice.
I'm sorry. The
go
Book
ahead.
of Enoch the Book of Enoch also did say that the angels that came down taught mankind things and showed secrets that they weren't supposed to know.
Yeah, exactly. How to fight, building armor and swords to fight each other. That's why that Azazel, I think his name is. He's the one attributed to all the sin of man.
Interesting. Well, we have been talking for about an hour. So is there anything final that you guys, gentlemen, would like to say? And we'll wrap up here because we can certainly talk a lot longer, and we certainly could talk another time as well.
Well, it's been enlightening, just the conversation we had here. Mike, for our listeners out there that are intrigued and want to learn more about this, I wonder if you would mind, you mentioned somebody just wrote a book that's more in layman's terms. If you could repeat his name, I don't know if you know what the name of the book is, or if there's any other research that they can do to look at this Book of Enoch. I mean, I thought I had known something about it before, but then I remembered it was the Book of Eli. Wasn't that something that they made a movie out of?
That was a good movie. That was a good movie.
For seeing, I know what Denzel Washington was in it, right? I believe,
Yeah,
but
that was a really good movie.
but that was not the Book of Enoch. But that might not be a bad, from what I can see with all the different things, that might not be a bad movie to make either. Just on the highlights of what it says. But any of our viewers, the folks that are tuning in that might want to learn a little bit more, we might possibly see if the gentleman that wrote that book might even want to be a guest and talk about it further. But is there any other advice you would give to folks? You've obviously done a lot of research, so maybe kind of where you went to look these things up and where other reference points people could go to.
Well, Ken Johnson is the name of the guy that wrote the book about Enoch.
Okay.
Not sure what the title of the book. It just came out. But other books that I have gotten was The Gap is Not a Theory. That's by Jack Langford. And that is a really good one. And he talks about the two creations between Genesis 1 and 2. There was a judgment. And that's another thing. God, like I said before, God extends mercy and grace to you. He gives you a long leash, very long leash. And then it comes to a point. He doesn't take it no more. And there's judgment. And America, I think it was Billy Graham. If America isn't judged, God owes Sodom and Gomorrah an apology. So,
yeah,
we could have judgment coming our way. I think it's winding down myself. But another book that I read was Earth's Earliest Ages by George Pember. That's where I got interested in this first. Was I read that one first, and we know nothing before the flood, and he gets into pre-flood history of the world.
Okay, well, this was a great talk, and I'd love to talk more, but we should wrap up here. So thank you, Tim and Mike, and thank you, viewers, for watching.
Hey, Mark, excuse my interruption, but Mike, I want to make sure that we continue. We love having you on here as a guest. We continue to promote your book that you wrote as well. It's The Witch of the Valley, and just give us a quick biography. What do I want to say? Just a quick description, I guess, of the book. So that's the word. I try not to use more than 2-syllable words, Mark. But yeah, synopsis.
Synopsis.
Yeah, I wrote the book, The Witch of the Valley, a novel about some shenanigans that took place in Valley City, Ohio. I renamed the town and I renamed characters. But in the early beginning of the book, I talk about digging in a salt mine, and when they go down in there, they find an evil spirit in this salt mine, and it possesses the witch. So she's not really a witch. She's possessed by an evil spirit. And then she has a dream when she's in jail after they catch her. And I relate to the books that I read that about pre-flood judgment. At first I was going to go into the all that stuff, and my son talked me out of it. So I made it just the flood of Noah. And it talks in the dream, the being that's possessing the witch talks about being imprisoned by Yahweh and in that salt mine. So when they dig in that, scratch around that salt mine, it disturbed him, and he talked the young Hazel, when she was a little girl, talked into letting it in so it could get out of its prison, and it goes from there.
And it's based, it's fiction based on some findings and stories that you've heard, throughout your years, from your youth and everything, from, I believe, your grandfather and some other stories that you've heard. So it's a good read. We'd suggest everybody get out there and get it. And you can get it you can get it on Amazon, right, Mike?
Yes, you get it on Amazon, and you get it Kindle or paperback.
And that's Mike Reusch, Reusch. Am I right, Mike?
That's correct.
Hey, I got one right, Mark. What do you think about that? Well, we appreciate it. We do talk a lot about local things here that we're involved in, but we know we get viewers from all over the country and even the world here. We're just scratching the surface. We're getting more and more subscribers every day, but we live in an area where there are a lot of resources for this kind of thing, for supernatural, for alien sightings and things like that. So we'll bring you stories from all over, but we do focus some on the immediate area only because it's so rich in material and folks that are around to talk about it. So that's all I got, though.
I got one other thing. When I was young, a friend of mine, 17 years older than me, told me that he had heard there was a burial mound in Valley City. And he's told me right where to look. I went searching for that many times. I never found it, but it's very interesting that, in Valley City, it's outside of the valley, actually, to the south of town. But I even lived close by, and I'd go walking around in the woods and trying to scope out the landscape and find it, but I never found it.
I was thinking, one last thought. I was thinking, seems off subject, but not. The Cleveland Browns are breaking ground on a new dome stadium. So that would be terrible if they dug the foundation for that dome stadium and they stumbled on something that would curse them and make them not play well.
What if they dug down there and they ran into giant bones, and then they had them studied and they were the bones of Y.A. Tittle?
Giants, I got you.
Or Jimmy Hoffa.
Right, a crime giant, right?
All right, thanks, guys. We're signing off, everybody. If you have a story to share, send it to us. Email it to us. share@projectwoowoo.wtf. share@projectwoowoo.wtf. We want to hear your story. We want to dig into these concepts, these unexplainable things. If you have a story to tell about a paranormal situation or, a UFO situation, we want to hear it. So until next time, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, audience. And we'll see you again out there sometime. Bye.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Thank you.